Hello, survivors, and welcome to A Moment of Relief, the first Day Spray show where we can discuss whatever we please, and with the remake of Resident Evil 4 in the rear view, we look ahead to see what's next. My name is Steve, and joining me on this episode are Kelsey and Berger.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I guess we'll just get started then, and then, how do we generally feel about the remakes of Resident Evil, everybody? Are we having a good time?
I'm having a great time. I love all the remakes that we've been seeing. My favorite of the recent remakes is probably... I know I'm in the minority here, but I really enjoyed the remake of Resident Evil 3 a lot. I love that game the way I love the movie RoboCop. It's just good popcorn fun. It's super violent, and it doesn't try to be anything other than what it is, which is a 90s action film.
It's divisive, but I can see these charms personally.
I do hate Resident Evil. So.
You hate Resident Evil?
It's noted on the podcast. Yeah.
The heel of First Aid Spray. Kels, where are you coming from when it comes to these remakes, my dude?
Well, I mean, I think Bergs is completely right. Remake 3 isn't my favourite. My favourite still to this day is Remake 2. Mm-hmm. But the thing about Remake 3 is, it's kind of weird. If you just pretend it's not a remake of Resident Evil 3 and just ignore all that.
Yeah.
It's such an awesome game.
It's so cool.
It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. It's so digestible. It's so easy to get, and so much you can have so much fun with it. Visually and technically, it's an absolute showcase of the RE engine.
Oh, yeah.
I said for a long time it was the best looking RE engine game. It still might be.
I think so.
It still might be. I think it probably is.
It's got a stronger colour palette than 4R, I feel.
Oh, and those the cutscenes. It's basically like watching a movie. Yeah. It's so good. Mm. So yeah, but Remake 2 is my favourite, and
which is valid. Remake 2 is amazing.
It is, and it was, everyone knows the OG 2 is my favourite, and the existence of Remake 2 doesn't bother me. It doesn't do any harm to the original. It's so separate. I can enjoy Remake 2 for the separate experience it is. I think it's beautiful. I remember when it came out. It was not long after my son had been born, so it was literally it came out 2 months after my son was born. Maybe not, maybe a month and a half. And I remember I was playing Remake 2. This is weird, isn't it? How stuff gets tied to things in your life. But so he would have been in his little bassinet, napping, while I had my headphones on playing Remake 2, which sounds really irresponsible as a parent to do. So I'd just be constantly looking over, but I didn't want to have the game volume loud and waking him up. But yeah, my memories of playing Remake 2 were a lot of I'm so sad, isn't it? It's just Resident Evil 2 was my favourite game of all time. Here I am playing the remake with my newborn son next to me, and yeah, it was a very special moment. And yeah, I've played it, as we know, probably close to 200 times, if you include all the speed runs and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm loving the remakes in general, hot off of RE4 as well.
See, I'm going to be the grumpy old man of the group and still say that my favourite remake is the one they did in 2002. Of the RE Engine squadron, the RE Engine remake group, I think I'm on Team RE2 mostly as well, and it's the same nostalgia hit because RE2 is also my favourite. It's the best Resident Evil. It's got brilliant pacing. It's easy as heck, and it's just got a lot of content to chew on. And the remake mostly carried that over. I mean, the B scenarios were a bit whack, but as a general thing, it felt like, oh my god, this is like taking RE4's camera and playing like an old Resident Evil game. It's amazing. And me and James, Mr. Moist Owl, were having a whale of a time launch night, getting terrified, live streaming. Mr. X, we thought would hunt us in our sleep. It was truly a resident experience. A resident experience. And yeah, my heart leans towards the older version, because obviously original RE2 will be there forever, my favourite. But I don't know, they did a great job. People will be disputing it over lore details of or character interpretations, different dialogue changes, but the thrust of the story is still, characters go there, the crisis occurs and they leave. And that pretty much follows for every remake, right? Mm-hmm. Jill still fights Nemesis. Leon still fights like a god-awful amount of Ganados and still saves Ashley and buggers off.
I to that end, I do talking about the hitting the beats. The story still remaining the same. They also like characterize you get more characterization of the characters. I think in the remake, like more personality comes through. Which I think is nice, especially for me. I really appreciate how much personality and character they gave Jill in Remake 3. Like again, I'm talking about that one. I think that Jill generally, prior to the third remake, had kind of a disservice done to her as a character. She was kind of just a MacGuffin that was there. Because the canon playthrough is Chris winning, right?
In RE1, it's debatable. Yeah. Some people will say Chris, some people will say Jill. Personally, I think Barry gets a lot of his lines referred to in Revelations 2, so that leans more towards that for me. But then again, why would Wesker be so ass-mad at Chris specifically if Jill was the one who messed his plans up in the original? It's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. But again, muddying of waters and stuff like that, that's probably one of the main controversial things, I feel. Like, yes, there's more character moments, but these were replaced by like inner thought monologue stuff where you would interact into objects in the older games. Like, Jill examines a desk and she would have a sentence saying, "Oh man, that desk is really organised, isn't it?" Whereas in the games now, she'll spout off lines ambiently as she's moving around as she sees the environment. It's a change. I feel like it's probably better because of a voice actress or voice actor can like relay the lines and then convey a bit more emotion to the role. I don't know where I was going with this. This is a real...
We were just talking about Jill and the characterization and stuff. And I agree with Bergs. It's like I remember tweeting after the game came out like, this is my favorite Jill. I think it's the best Jill. I think the performance was incredible. It felt like, I know that people love the performance love the Jill in the remake, Resident Evil 1 remake, I should say. Remake 3 just felt like it had all the badassery that we know Jill for, but I don't think was ever properly visualized before. I think we filled in a lot of gaps ourselves, and because we loved the character. RE3 remake was just Nicole's performance and the way the game looks and stuff just so good. It's easily my favorite depiction of Jill without question.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm just saying, it looks like both she and I think Christian has been recast, hasn't he? Every other character who's appeared in the RE Engine game so far has kept the same voice. And she's even, I think she's still voicing herself. Well, of course she's voicing herself. She's still voicing Jill in the upcoming movie.
That is right. And I think that's because she's fantastic.
She did really well.
That's not to save money, because I imagine she's becoming more expensive with every iteration, she does.
I am Jill Valentine. You will pay me more money. And she deserves it. I can see 100%. Why she was in use in Village, because the COVID pandemic, your actors are already on hand for this stage. You can then move on to that stage. That makes a lot more sense.
And you do say that, but it feels like that's been a thing that's happened with video game actors for a long time. Even when they come into mocap, they would fulfill multiple roles all the time. So it was definitely, I think, a bit of both with that, like trying to be clever with the resources. But you get, just look at like the Bethesda games, and there's actors in there that play like 100 different characters. Like Wes Johnson is one of them, and they sometimes forget what cadence they're meant to have for this role they're playing, and therefore use a different voice in the same character sentence. And that's just some of that Bethesda magic, and I hope Starfield has some. Seriously. Okay. I feel like, we should probably move to our next little bullet point. And so do we think this RE4R, do we think RE4R is the end of remakes? Kelsey, go. No. I mean, you could look at it from a number of ways. You could look at it from just a financial business perspective, and it's like, whether you want it or not, they're going to make more, because clearly it's an easy win. And I think we have to be honest. Video game production at this level for these games is so expensive you can't just keep pumping out the games and hoping that the new ones are as successful and will fund the future. Putting out a remake like this is beneficial to the franchise in so many ways, and specifically financially. So Capcom will be definitely remaking more games. They're not the only studio doing it. They're not, people out there aren't stupid. And whether they should or not is kind of like, you could say it's up for debate, but I just think if you love Resident Evil, you want it to continue, they probably should keep doing remakes because of what's involved in making video games. So, yeah, for me, it's definitely not the end. No.
Berger, do you agree with this sentiment?
I concur with my colleague Kelsey. No, I think that the fact that Resident Evil 4 sold like it did is a really great indicator that we're going to see a lot more remakes. Maybe not a lot more, but I think we'll see some of the older ones get remade. And I think we'll go from there. We'll see Capcom start doing other remakes. Devil May Cry, potentially. The RE engine is such a powerhouse. And when you think about the nature of how a lot of these games that are made in engines, where it's a lot of like... Steve with Tarp Watch, right? There's a lot of assets that just are present and get made. That they can just, like they can crank these games out, like, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, even back then were turned around really quick because they use a lot of the same assets. And I think that because we'll see that happening, we'll see new assets get made for whatever the mainline title is, and we'll see those assets used in whatever remake is. There's a lot of assets. I imagine if we were to do a deep dive, we were to do like a pot watch and look at all the different like foodstuffs that you see in Resident Evil 4. We'll see those same assets.
I remember this bread. It was clearly in the Pueblo village, and now it's in the Spencer estate. What the F?
Exactly. So I think we'll see some of that. I do hope that it doesn't become the point of Resident Evil. It's just like remakes, but I wouldn't mind seeing remakes of some of the other stuff, like the one we'll probably mention and talk about a great deal of Code Veronica, which I think is another one that just needs love. It's the only one that hasn't had a relaunch or anything like that, and
it's a divisive game, especially on the podcast. But I do think that like a lot of people were very when 4R was announced that like, oh, they're snubbing CV, and I feel like it's a much more complicated mess to untangle than Leon go into village, shoot the living daylights out of the village, save President's daughter is a lot easier to handle than half the stuff that happens in CV, because you've got a teenage kid shooting his dad, you've got a prison torture camp, you've got all the weird stuff with the Ashfords. It's a lot to rewrite and make probably a bit more
palatable?
I don't like the term, but socially acceptable, palatable.
Sure.
Stuff that happens in CV probably won't fly as easy as it did back then now, and that's just some of the dialogue. I'm definitely on team if they have to remake something, probably that one, and that's because I absolutely cannot stand CV on its own. That's a topic for another day, I feel. I'm very much on the same page. I feel like I don't know if I'm happy about the fact that the remake train seems to be never ending. Like, someone joked, I think it was some of the REP guys, that Resident Evil 9 will be the first game that has a remake before its original release made and come out, which is like, it's getting a bit that way. I do think they should probably pump the brakes a little. It's 4 has made gangbusters. It's like making almost as much money as any other Resident Evil game to date. And I mean, that's common in most Resident Evil games these days. They've come out, and then the new one, like, we're almost smashing the record set by, the big ones, RE5 and OG RE2. And Village, I guess, now. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I just think it's weird. Sometimes it's easy for us folks to forget. We're not 13 years old, right? We've
I'm
been
wearing a Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirt, Kelsey.
Also wearing a video game.
I can pretend. No, I'm not. I'm really not.
There's so many people that will just never. And I've said this. I'm maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but I've said one of my main arguments about the remaking of the remake of Resident Evil 1 for me is because I personally know people that just will not play games with tank controls, and it's an old system that we're all used to and we're fine with. They'll be young whippersnappers out there today that have no interest in jumping on those old games.
Absolutely.
And I think in terms of reintroducing the franchise and keeping the franchise alive financially and keeping the new games selling, remakes are just an easy win. And to put another, you said Code Veronica, you could I personally don't think we're going to see a remake of 6. I think a remake of 5 is possible. I think the remake of 1 and Code Veronica is more possible probably than those two. But yeah, I just think they will continue because there's such a large audience of people out there that buy video games and play video games that have never played those originals, or maybe have tried to and just have gone, nah, I'm not doing this. I'd rather play it the way that I'm used to. So yeah, it's easy to forget, is what I'm trying to say sometimes, that we think, it doesn't need a remake. The original's so good. There's people who will never play the original. Never. For those, for that reason. And Code Veronica is tank controls and it's semi-static camera. We have the little bit of movement.
It's got a dolly every so often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still just people won't play it because it's not familiar enough to them.
So It is interesting to think about stuff like that as well, in terms of just modernizing the gameplay. Like, a lot of people complain about the lack of tank controls in Remake 2, but I personally feel like, and this is after having played the original OG recently again, of like those games were made because of the limitations that we had in technology at the time. I think walking through those similar hallways in Remake 2, seeing them from like a closer perspective to how Leon himself or Claire herself was experiencing them, it drove a whole new level of like immersion and realness. Like, gosh, I love these remakes because of how the environments, like, they're the same, right? Like the main hallway in the Raccoon City police station is memorable. It's iconic. It looks like it should, but it also looks like an actual building now.
Yeah.
And like, instead of hallways just not, ending right, and they're boarded up, they're barricaded. Like, yes, that hallway doesn't go that way on purpose, but when you look that way, it's not that it's not there, it's that there's piles of stuff in the way that are part of the scenery that are blocking you from going that way. So I think those things are important to the remake. I do like the original remake of Resident Evil 1. Am I interested in seeing an over-the-shoulder remake of Resident Evil 1? I admittedly don't know. Like Steve said, I think that the original one was so good at capturing the essence of what that game was and what the genre was at the time, that I think to mess with that, despite some of our friends in the community's objections, I think
reticence to this idea.
Here's the thing. I agree. Does it need a remake? No.
I mean, I was on Team RE4, didn't a remake. Just saying, everybody.
Sure.
And but having that remake, for like I say, there will just be people that will go, oh yeah, this is easier to play. And in terms of the future stability of the franchise, I think it does no harm. There's people that think remakes harm the originals and think it harms the franchise and it quells new ideas. I don't think it does that at all. I don't think it does any harm because it's such a big level. This is not two people in their garage making a video game that can kind of do whatever they want. There's so many moving parts. There's so much money. There's so much high-end tech. If a remake of Remake 1 is going to fund the next 5 original RE games,
sure,
why not?
Yeah. Give me.
I don't have to play it.
Give me the remake.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people's reticence is as much like the narrative and the way that it's portrayed in the original remake. There is a lot of love for that particular take on Chris and Jill, and I can appreciate that. I totally can. I also feel like there's a lot of appreciation for Catherine Disher as Jill in Resident Evil 3, Paul Haddad in Resident Evil 2 as Leon, and their newer counterparts have done a bang-up job too. I don't know.
I would say they're almost more revered, Steve. It's so weird, isn't it? Because we now live in this time with social media where people have access to the voice actors, that there's young fans that they don't revere those original voice actors in the same. And the audience was smaller, the sales numbers were smaller back then. People like, Jeff and Nicole and everybody, they have, and Nick as well. huge fan bases. Like they're huge movie stars, whereas those guys back then, they weren't. They were just, to us little nerds, we loved their voice, and I don't think they got to reap the rewards of how much they were revered. Whereas the voice actors today, like they're loving life because they got huge fan bases.
It's valid.
So I guess we're already skirting around the topic. So the RE, how would we remake RE1? If we say we're Capcom, we've been given the money. What do you do? Is it like Bergs, take us away. Let's start.
So let's paint a mental picture here. Let's think about the things that they've changed in a lot of these remake stuff. They're addressing problematic issues. They're fixing some personalities, some characterization issues. I feel like if we were to get a remake of Resident Evil 1, like the old Spencer Mansion, it would probably be the closest to a 1-to-1 that we'll have seen. I can't.
So 1-to-1 again, basically.
Right. It'd be they'd modernize it. They'd give you the ability. They'd make it so that it was an over-the-shoulder experience. So obviously the world would be characterized a little differently. There'd be a lot more personality in the mansion. I'm so excited for that. Hell, hypothetically, it could even be the one where they say, hey, if you want to play this in an over-the-shoulder camera, if you want to play this from skybox cameras, you can. It's the community has shown that it's possible to do that in the remake engine. The remake engine. Oh, it's terrible, but accurate. Yeah. In the RE engine, it's easily moddable. People have been doing it for the remakes to make static cameras. If they were going to give us an official static camera Resident Evil remake, it'd be Resident Evil 1. I'm thinking of stuff that they could cut out of Resident Evil, because they've cut something out of all of them, right? You lost the big toy giant in Resident Evil 4. You lost the clock tower in Resident Evil 3. You lost other stuff in Resident Evil 2. What would they take out? What's the problem? What's the extra part that they can remove from Resident Evil 1? That's the question.
I'm in camp. Why not just expand on what's already there in a very cheeky way? For example, in Resident Evil 1 remake, you can get the tape off of Kenneth's body. Mm-hmm. A VHS of him getting admittedly just minced by a zombie and he's dead.
Minutes before you see him too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
RE7, a lot of people...
Mark that. Timestamp that. 24 minutes.
It annoys me. Right? RE7 had one of the greatest mechanics of the whole VHS tapes where you basically did a thing and learnt about something. Or, have a puzzle explained to you or something. World building stuff. Every one of these characters have a body camera. Every STARS member has a body camera, or at least it's alluded to in the opening for the remake, the original remake. Why not have moments where you can play as Forrest, or you can play as Enrico
their
or
last
whatever.
Moments would be so cool. Oh
it doesn't necessarily have to be their last moments. Enrico's dropped a tape somewhere. You can Enrico did this at this point, some point, and did that. Expand on the Bravo team, basically, because we already know what happens to Alpha team. They all walk in, Wesker goes, oi, check that dining room out, it's a bit dodgy, innit, youth? And then they all go in there, Wesker buggers off, and plots unbroil. I feel like nicking that, leeching some of the newer stuff. Maybe not gunpowder and crafting, because I'm sick to death of gunpowder and crafting, but that's probably because I'm an old man. Kels, you have any brain... sparking brilliant ideas?
Bergs took the words right out of my mouth. I think, having the option, just if we're talking about little things, the option to switch between camera angles, I think that would be such a huge selling point for a remake. If you're looking for reasons to make it other than financial, offering choice is a big one, and that would be so good. And it would appease a lot of different people, of different players. What you said, Steve, about expanding. I think we said, although Remake 4 did have cuts, they were kind of very minor. Yeah. I think it added more than it cut, which is good, in terms of depth and characterization and stuff like that. So it was pretty close to the original. But I think, use that opportunity to expand on the stuff that we want them to expand on. I just think, as I've kind of already said, it's on a plate for them in terms of visualizing that iconography, the iconic locations in the RE engine, the Reach for the Moon engine, that's what it's called, right? I mean,
yes.
Anyway. that's like, for me, is just like excuse enough alone to make it. And I know that it's excuse enough for people who are. Okay, I was going to say shallow is the wrong word. The people who want graphics to be good, you know, graphics do not make video games. We know this, but they can help. And there's a lot of people that won't play, you know, pixel art style games and retro games and stuff like that because they want it to be real, as close to real as possible. And Berg's mentioned that over the shoulder and the immersion you get. There's a lot of people that want that stuff. That's all they want. So, and we haven't seen that with the Spencer Mansion. And I don't want to hear, you know, what's it, Umbrella Chronicles and stuff like that, first person where you're right in there. That's not the same, you know. as much as you enjoy it, Steve.
No, I can make it cringe even further. Okay, the last rendition of Spencer Mansion we've had was Umbrella Core.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness.
No.
Yeah. You know, we were, when REverse came out, as whatever you think of the game, we were like, this might be our first chance to see the Spencer Mansion in the RE engine. I think it would be a wasted opportunity if they don't do that at some point. And I think just all that stuff alone presents me personally as a lifelong Resident Evil fan, as much as I would love all this fantastic technical, you know, add this lore, expand on this character, be able to switch between cameras. If they just want to do one for one but over the shoulder in the RE engine, I will still buy 100%.
It. I'd play the hell out of it.
Day one. Yep. I'm all for it. So yeah, I'm easy to please maybe in that sense, but I feel like because of they maybe took some lessons, as much as we love RE3 Remake, as we've said, I think they knew with RE4, let's expand where we can. Let's only cut what we really feel we need to. And I think the cuts they made were correct. I don't think anybody thinks that they should have left the giant running robot statue in.
I mean, I personally like Salazar gear, but I know it's completely camp and kitsch and silly.
Metal Gear.
It maybe just pushes it a little bit too far, doesn't it? And, you know, you got the reference to, he was still there. Yeah. It was just used in a different way, so that was smart. And so I think that they learnt lessons with RE3 and it gave us RE4 Remake, and we'll potentially realise how much that has sold and done well, and they've pleased so many people. Let's just keep pleasing people. It won't be the next thing that comes along. Yeah. I always said that Remake 1, I think, would be their 30th anniversary thing, but we're getting close to that now. What's that? That's like another 3 years away. So we could get an RE9 and a Remake 1 for the 30th anniversary. But
we could also get a half-baked multiplayer game.
Oh,
good. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. My heart breaks.
Let's get a really nice team deathmatch game going on. With weird objectives.
I was thinking, there's probably one thing that could potentially get cut from Remake 1, and it's if this did happen, people would be mad. It would be the choice of who you get to play as. I get the feeling they would make it so that you're playing so many bits as Chris and so many bits as Jill, so that it can have a coherent narrative. Plus, it's less hassle to code. There's something that says to me that would be the change. That would be the cut. They wouldn't be able to have it so you can do this, that, and the other. And it also means Chris gets to say hello to Barry for the first time in video game history, since Leon's now meeting Jill for the first time in Death Island.
That's funny. That's so funny.
But no, really, it's
like we said. What would you do for the remake? How does it get remade? It doesn't really need it. They did such a great remake already, but it's like they have the new engine. That's excuse enough to make it. That's different enough, I think, for me. And I am on board with the idea that you can't recreate that atmosphere and stuff. It's like, well, you can in that context, like in with those graphics. It's different. They're recreating a different atmosphere and a different experience with the RE engine, with over the shoulder. So it's not the same game. The remake, even though it's called Resident Evil Remake 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, it's not the same game. It's just called Remake for branding. Like it's a completely different experience. It's not like watching the Psycho remake, which is like a shot-for-shot remake of the original with new actors and in color. This is not the same thing. Game tech is different. Sorry, Berg.
I have let's close our eyes for let's talk about just think about an iconic scene. I'm gonna pick the most iconic scene that anybody who's ever played Resident Evil, even a little bit, knows. The hallway scene, right? So let's think about how our game experiences are with Resident Evil now. Like, we're tight over the shoulder. You open that door, it's slow, it creaks loudly. dusty carpet on the side. It's raining, storming outside, lightning cracks. You go down, you hear a wind gust rattle against the tree. Chris jumps, or whatever. You go down their way. You hear the dogs running up and down the side, on the outside. You see one come and scrabble against the window at one point, and you think that's the jump reveal, right? You think that and then old heads like us, like, they got me, they got us that way, and then there's a second level of that later, like. That's the kind of stuff that we can have. Like, that's the kind of stuff that they can give us with this remake. Like, right there in your face happening, as opposed to, like, walking down this hallway where if you, having played it once or twice, you see the angle, you know that something is obviously going to go on. And one of the things that they do, we're talking old school stuff, is part of what made those camera angles crazy was what you didn't see on camera. Like, what you didn't see. Yeah. Was terrifying because you enter a room, you don't see anything but yourself standing there, but you hear shuffling. Like, that stuff is all stuff that they can still carry on. That's all stuff that can still happen. Like, I think the tense quiet that we haven't had since since Resident Evil 1 is something that they can really play with, because like everything else is like the city's exploding, Leon's rushing. Yeah. Like there hasn't been another one where it's just this tense, quiet investigation. Which, like, I think would be great to see. Give me more investigation elements. Like, make them police.
Well, I mean, Resident Evil 1 is notable for it's still one of the only Resident Evil games where there's so many death traps. Including the remake. There's death traps throughout. Okay, fair. But, like, you got, like, the cannibal trap in CV, and then you got a handful of spike traps in Lost in Nightmares. It's not really anything compared to RE1, where every other room had some horrible way to kill you. Making the players be a bit more, use their brain cells a little bit, and, observe the environment and do investigative things and learn how to solve puzzles. Maybe watch a Bravo team videotape learning how to dodge a certain trap.
I think that'd be dope. Like, that's honestly birds. My favorite thing I would want to see in a remake one now is collect the tapes from the other players, and just like in 7, like, give me the opportunity to it was 7. Give me the opportunity to, like, watch those and play as Kenneth's last moments. God, I'm just sitting here picturing it. Like, Kenneth is, like, he's shooting that zombie guy. He's like, what, like, in it, like, you hear, why isn't he stopping? What's going on? Like, give me a video of the itchy. I said itchy painting. Give me a video. Give me that as, like, a video diary of this guy, and every time he sits down in front of it, is, like, more and more falling apart. And give me stuff like that.
There was some, like, Anorak or other type. They'll go, they didn't do video blogs in 1998.
Shut up!
They're an umbrella scientist. Maybe they're just, like, well, I don't think that was a keeper for the animals, but they can make it an umbrella scientist. Like, oh dear, day 3 of T-virus infection. It's not going well, lads. I've got to be honest, feeling a bit itchy and tasty right now.
Listen, they definitely had video cameras back then. I'm sure in labs they would have been recording data. So I'd buy. I can buy into that idea.
Okay. So right, I think we're going a bit off topic, but we've actually we've skipped one of our many points.
What was the point?
And this is a spoiler check. Spoilers. Resident Evil 4R. Okay, everybody. This is spoilers. Resident Evil 4R. At the end of Resident Evil 4, there is a post or mid-credit scene where Ada meets Wesker for the first time. What? Okay, and this scene, they show, like, Wesker's big, like, screen, his mastermind chaos screen where you can see lots of screenshots. You've got the Stairway of the Sunflower. You've got RE5's Excellegione, notably still looking like RE5's Excellegione.
I was going to say, it's like compressed JPEGs that they've managed to squeeze into the end there. Yeah.
And people are taking this as writ. A lot of people on social media, as a matter of fact, that this is signs that 5 is in fact next. Now, we've talked CV briefly, or at least I've talked CV. We've talked 1. Do we think 5 might be the one next? Bergs, I'll let you start.
I would say yes. 5 is incredibly problematic for a lot of reasons. There's a video essay done by a fellow named Noah Gervais that I'm pretty sure we've all watched at this point, where he talks about the problems with Resident Evil 5 and how divisive that was, and how the Japanese response to those situations, or at the very, I should say, the Capcom response to those in those situations has been, oh well, we it's like, oh, sorry. And I do appreciate that they're going back and handling some of those problematic elements in their remake. So I do think that we'll see a remake of 5. I do think that it will address a lot of the problematic issues. I can't fathom how, given the setting of the game.
It's not an easy thing to handle in a. I don't know how to pass this in a very eloquent way, but in a post-BLM rioted world, having a white man walk into an African town centre shooting, they may be infected, they may not be very well, but shooting an absolute load of people, it's going to cause problems. And yes, people will say, well, it's okay for Leon to shoot loads and loads of Spaniards. It's okay for Leon to shoot loads and loads of Chinese zombies in RE6. I'm not saying those things. I'm saying the world is a different world now. You can't just stereotype enemies. It's definitely a difficult thing to pass, and it's unfortunate because RE5 does have like some of the best lore connections in the whole series. It's the through line for the entirety of the T virus, the progenitor virus. It's the conclusion of Chris and Wesker's beef. You even get Jill being a
plot device.
A damsel, but she redeems herself. Yeah, she becomes a plot device initially, but then she eventually pretty much is the way they save the day. A lot goes on there. And then there's fan favourite characters like Chevron Lamar and Josh Stone, who haven't been seen since. It's there's a lot there that would be great. I don't know how the hell they can do it. Kels, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts. I would be stunned if it's not already in production. I mean, these games, as far as I'm aware, RE4 started production in 2019, like after Remake 2 came out. These games are not turned around in 18 months. It takes them 4 or 5 years to make. So I think they wouldn't go to the effort to put in the end of RE4 what they did if it wasn't already on the roadmap. Now, is it going to be set in Africa? I think that would be... I just think it would be the wrong move. I just think there is... For me, I do not care where it's set. Like, if what I mean is, I don't care if they move it out of Africa and put it anywhere else. They can change everything as far as I'm concerned. I think keeping characters is the most important thing. To remake RE5 and say not have Sheva would be...
criminal.
Stupid. Just don't do that. But I don't really care where it's set. In terms of moving it, I'm not so protective. I've said this before of the lore. When the remakes change some lore and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, okay, I see how that can annoy some people up, but I'm happy for it to be moved somewhere else. I'm happy for the crux of the storyline. I think somebody else said, this was possibly on our friends at the REP podcast said, I think if they remake RE5, they won't kill Wesker off as well. They think it's to keep him alive and move into something else for the future.
You need a MacGuffin to keep the storyline going.
Yeah, so that means it doesn't have to finish in a volcano or anything like that. So I think RE4 Remake planted the seeds of co-op with the sections with Carlos and stuff like that. He literally throws ammo to you like it's just a thing straight out of RE5. And yeah, the same way that Village kind of planted seeds for RE4 and that kind of style and systems. We had the inventory system was changed up for the briefcase and stuff like that. I think, yeah, it's already in production. Like I said, I didn't know whether it would be next. I think we'll probably get an original game next. But yeah, I think it's probably definitely coming. I don't think you make Wesker and put a big sequence. Unless for some, wild reason, when we get DLC for RE4... it all gets wrapped up in there instead, which is a route they could take. It could be a chunky DLC, and maybe
they're going to give us new Resistance DLC, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, yeah,
I take it.
So yeah, I think it's going to happen. I do think they should change it up. I don't think anybody is really that protective of RE5, to be honest with you. I think nobody's going to be that bothered if they change up more, than... if they set RE4 in London, I think people would be like, why have you done that? It might turn out to be great, but they'd be a bit confused. I think if they move RE5 to somewhere else in Europe or the States, or I don't know, whatever. I don't think as people would be that bothered, to be honest.
For me, if they move RE5 somewhere, they should probably set it up first in, like, we're going way into the weeds with an RE0 thing, because that's the only other place it really is mentioned where the progenitor comes from.
But does that mean you have to set a whole game there? Because I get that's where it comes from, yeah, and maybe they will demote it to a file.
God, I mean,
or an opening sequence or something like that, or a videotape. Maybe it's a 15-minute section of a game. I don't know. It is wild to think that if they remake RE5, it would be the same as the original RE5. I can't imagine that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the thrust, isn't it?
But I think they're remaking it. So it's not a remake. It's this new. They've already sort of said, haven't they? They kind of not called remakes. It's new versions.
Reimaginings.
It's different. Yeah. It doesn't say remake on the front cover,
sure.
So they can do whatever they want, and I'm fine with them doing whatever they want in terms of changing it. Sure. I mean,
so are we saying that Resident Evil Village is the end of Resident Evil Generation 1, and we are now in Generation 2, or Beast Wars, with the remakes? This is Steve going Transformers nerd for 5 seconds. Don't mind me. The worst part is Beast Wars is still part of the original Transformers G1 canon, but what the hell do we know? Because wikis. Right, anyway, so yeah. Okay, here's a question for you.
Sure.
Mechanically, what do you change about 5? Because 5 is the one that's the most, I think, besides stopping to shoot and move, moving and shooting, there really is not much to change from 5 to the modern games, other than like crafting elements. Maybe make, a single player option where Sheva is an AI partner who just throws ammo like Luis. I don't know how you would change it mechanically.
I don't know that you need to. It already behaves a lot like you'd expect the games to. Obviously, you'd be able to. It'd probably be exactly like Resident Evil 4 is, where you're not held up when you pull the trigger to aim your gun. I'd be interested to see more of the CQC stuff, like we saw a little bit in Resident Evil, where Leon has his knife combo. I would be personally very interested in seeing some more melee. I really like the parry system. If their goal is to continue with overwhelming you as a player with like as many things as possible, giving you as a player, which they would have to add more because there's two bodies you have to contend with, so it obviously increased the volume of enemies, like giving you more ways to deal with those without spending ammunition. I think would be something I would like to see, especially if we're taking out the crafting system.
Chris can now parry knives and other things with his bare hands, or
he has a knife.
Boulders to punch.
It's on his shoulder.
With his biceps.
Yeah, he does have his shoulder knife, but I feel it's funnier if he parries it with his bare hands, or just summons boulders, or his biceps, like Kel said. Yeah, proper tiger drop counter. That's it. It solves it instantly. Kel, so you got any thoughts on mechanical changes?
Not really, nothing else to add. I think, we would just see an iteration. It would just feel like a lot like RE4. I think RE4 is almost like a dry run for it, and they're testing out all right, you can't play as Luis, but he's there as a partner. What do you add? I mean, I don't know what I'm looking for them to. I'm not looking for them to add anything else. I mean, it's beyond deciding to make it first person, which I wouldn't think they would do. It's just going to play a lot like RE4, feel modern, hopefully with, I think maybe having the choice,
play as Chris or Sheva.
I just think just trying to give you more choice. Maybe they look at what they did with RE2, and I don't know. I really don't have much to add. I just think it would be, I think they will just capitalize on the fact that RE4 did so well. I don't know they need to change much. It's bringing it to a new fidelity, new graphics, new engine, and all this kind of thing. Modernized controls. It would probably sell incredibly well. Do they, because it has such a focus on co-op, do they implement some kind of bigger multiplayer that we've been looking for as well, which is sort of not landed yet with RE? Is RE5 an opportunity to do that in terms of its package? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I think really then the only thing to ask now is, when does it end? when is the stopping point for the remake, like the remake train? Because, like I said earlier, that the brakes need to pump. There's only so many more games we can do before we're remaking what we've already remade. Like, we've got Zero, CV, divisively RE1, 5, 6,
Outbreak.
7, Village, Outbreak. Yeah, Outbreak Fire 1 and 2. You've got, you've got Gaiden, Survivor, Dead Aim, the Revelations games. I suppose there is a lot left on that road to walk, but
I don't think we'll see remakes of like Revelations 1 and 2. I don't think we're going to see a remake of Zero. I think some of those ones, Gaiden, like there's games that they just want to sweep under a rug and pretend that they don't exist, and I think Zero is one of them.
Yeah.
That was a failed experiment. I appreciate it existed. I liked what it tried to do. It just didn't. You try something fun and then it just doesn't work out, and you move on. I think we'll see 1, 5, and CV, and then we'll be done.
Okay. See, there's a part of me that has a real soft spot for Revelations 2, because it's like the perfect like epilogue piece for Resident Evil 5, as it turns out. With a lot of stuff wraps up in that was alluded to in 5's various parts and DLC. If I personally was on the remake, like the conductor of the remake train, I would have already stopped it though. Yeah. So it's hard for me. Kels, where are you sitting?
Well, what is it you said a minute ago? Something like you feel like that generation has ended and we've moved on. So I feel like kind of what Berg said. I see 5 coming. I definitely see 1 coming. Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of those outliers that aren't main entries, it's only Code Veronica. There's not going to be remakes of those other side games. Yeah. I think they're not going to remake, like loads of people want Outbreak remade, and I think Outbreak wasn't that successful. I think if they're going to do an online game, it's not going to be an Outbreak remake. They're trying other things, aren't they? They've done it, for better or worse. And then so I guess what we will do is once we've ended up with this new timeline that's stops at 5 remakes, whatever comes after that in the timeline is potentially original or leads back into where Village and everything is, and then that's where it's all back together again, because we're assuming that RE3 remake and RE4 are in the same universe as Village, even if Village is in the same universe as the originals. Yeah, and so that's where it kind of comes back together again after that. And yeah, I don't see them remaking 6. I think that will just disappear forever.
It would have to be 3 separate games, the sheer scope of the bloody thing.
I think anything that happens in 6 that they want to keep canon will just be could just be referenced in future, like through files or something like that. I mean, maybe you could say that a character like Simmons or something could crop up, but I don't think they're going to go the whole way to remake it. They're only going to remake things that they know will sell well. I don't think a remake of 6 would sell. Even though the original sold loads and still sells today, I think they get that it's sold off the back of the success of the sort of predecessors.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get a 5, we'll get a 1. Whether people want it or not, we'll get a 1. And I do think we'll get Code Veronica. I think that is the one. That's the anomaly where the demand is high enough and people think it could do with a remake. And then it'll all join together as a nice timeline. And then we'll just have some original games for a few years, and then maybe we get where does it go technical wise? We get some more VR remakes, I suppose, cool. Some VR ports. But in terms of technical showcases, you think about when you're younger, the graphics cannot get better than this. Like, we're sort of at that point now. They can't get better than what they are. They can't. They come photorealistic, and I don't want it to be photorealistic anyway. So yeah, once the timeline comes back together after those remakes, they will probably not do another remake for a long, long time. We're going to be old and grey, before they come along.
Resident Evil 4, 3.
So yeah, I think we got 2 or 3 more absolutely coming. Bring it on.
Give me more Resident Evil. No.
Yeah.
It's a bit dangerously close to product, must consume product.
The other thing that I wanted to say, I don't think I've really sort of touched on, like, I need to caveat and disclaimer everything I'm saying with, like, I do get this idea of protecting the artistic integrity and stuff like that. Which people do get very hung up about, like, don't do it. Don't do it unless you can make it better and stuff like that. I just think, or maybe I did say it, like, video games are different, and I think I'm happy to protect I don't think making a remake gets rid of the artistic integrity of an original. What may destroy the artistic integrity of original is somebody like a corporation like Sony choosing not to put out collections of the originals. And I think they're obviously, Sony aren't deciding to make the next Resident Evil. It's not their game. But I think that, so I'm kind of getting mixed up in my head here, but what I'm trying to say is, if they want to remake Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, it doesn't get rid of the original games. The fact that some of them can't be accessible today is not a remake's fault.
Correct.
No.
I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
I think that is definitely, like, if I had a choice right now, if I'm Johnny Capcom, my first remake is actually a solid straight-up port of the original PS1 trilogy. Like, we do them. Like, if Mega Man can get it, like, if Street Fighter... If I can get Street Fighter 1, a absolute dumpster fire of a fighting game. Oops. On...
What's that? 52 minutes?
Yeah. An absolute dumpster fire of a fighting game on a Series X or a PS5, but I can't get Resident Evil 2, that is a war crime, Capcom. That is a declaration of ignorance. I don't know. It's harsh.
I feel like there has to be other reasons, because it is money left on the table. I don't know why it's not happening. I feel like the only reason it's not happened, maybe it's not possible. There's got to be a technical reason it's not possible. There's something has been lost. Something, because it's not they can't afford it. It's not a resource thing. I feel like if it was possible, it would have happened. Why hang on to it?
I mean, it's been ported to everything under the sun already. 2 and 3 have Dreamcast, GameCube, PC. It can't be like
somebody delete a folder in like 2005.
But not digitally, right? All of those products were released physically on the PC. If like to think about it that way,
yeah.
Has any of these games, except for maybe Code Veronica, which is I think the only one of the old ones that you can buy on like Steam, has any of those ones been available on a digital marketplace at any point in any capacity?
The PSN store.
Oh yeah, it's a PS1 game. Okay.
Yeah. And again, what does that mean? Is there some kind of technical thing there? That ecosystem allows it, but something else that I don't know. I don't pretend
even
to
then.
Know. I just
like, it's not ideal. I grant you. I would rather it be available to all, but that should mean why isn't it on the Sony systems?
Yeah.
It's not. It's still money on the table, even if it was just for the Sony systems. It's daft.
Yeah.
It infuriates me.
I can't believe they're sitting there going, "Oh no, we'll wait for a rainy day before we release these." No, just they haven't waited for a rainy day to release Resident Evil 4 20 times. Like, there has to be a reason that we're not aware of why it's not happened, because it's baffling.
I can get Street Fighter 1 on the Switch. I can't get Resident Evil 2 on the Switch. That's enough.
It's insane. Yeah.
And on that charming and insane note, I think it's probably best we start wrapping up.
Right.
Remake one.
Remake one. The re-release of E.T.
So, thank you so much for watching or listening. And this has been a moment of relief. You can get a lot of our content early by supporting us at patreon.com/FASprayPod. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Berger.
Thank you.
I've been Steve. I don't have a fancy sign-off, so I'm going to just nick size. Have a good week.
Have a good week.